Every kit that you get comes with these pre-made up pieces that fit beautifully together, and most of them are very well made, and they really make a fantastic grill. But if you're going to scratch build, of course, you have to build these from scratch. And I've been researching all over the net and really having difficulty finding proven ways of making grills. If we look at the thickness of the cut, and it's 104, so that means we need to get a blade that's 104 thick, and the thickness of the space is 97 millimeters, 0.97 millimeter, 0.93, slight variation. The best blade thickness closest to that I could get was 1.13, which is not too far off of what is cut here. Now, quite clearly, if you look at this piece, the grain is running this way, which gives it some strength. So on the piece of timber I'm going to use, the grain is running this way, which means I'm going to be cutting the pieces, cutting the slots this way, which will give the greatest strength for the little pieces that are left up. So we're just going to cut off a piece. I found three ways to make the grating so far. The first one uses the pre-arc. The second one is a combination of all the saws using the method in the Swan practicum. And the third one, which will turn out to be the best of the three, makes a modification to the sliding table. So we'll go through each one of these and you can choose whichever one best suits you. In the case of the pre-arc, I have the largest number of saw blades. I think it's 17 in total, while on the Jim Barnes so far I only have 3. To determine the thickness of the spacer, we need to add the thickness of the blade. This is 103 with the thickness of the space, which is 195, and that's add them together and that will give you the thickness of the spacer we need to put on the saw. So that means we need a spacer that is 2.51 millimeters, and that's what this is. And we put that to determine the length of the first cut. We're using the sliding table on the pre-arc, and we also have a little spacer I've put here because the blade doesn't go all the way through, and this gives me the depth of cut that I get a nice clean groove all the way. So here we go. And we've got our first cut. To get the second cut, you slacken the stop, place the spacer tightly up against the board, keeping it still in the groove of the blade so that this can't move, and you tighten the stop back. Take the spacer out, move it down, push the board flat against it, and you make the second cut. You need to make sure that this is square against the stop. And there you get second cut. So to set up for the next cut, same thing, leaving the board in the jaws of the blade, push the spacer out, put the spacer, tighten up, move it back, slide it down, put my extra spacer here, and make the second cut. And you'll continue to get these cuts, and when it's all done you'll end up with a piece like this. Now we're going to change the blade on the pre-arc, and we're going to use a very thin, very sharp blade, because in trying to do this in the past I found that the thinner the blade, the cleaner the cut. These pieces cannot be roughed up at all on the saw. To set the thickness of the frame, we can use the existing frame size, which is 0.77 millimeters. We know the cut is 103, so it should be just a little less than 103. Or you could use this, which is what I'm going to do. Use this frame to set the thickness. So a very loose fit, and that will give me the thickness of the frame pieces. To make sure they're exactly square, because this piece can change, I'm using a square and pushing it right up against the guard so that I can get nice thin square cuts. And it's really just getting too hard to hold this now. So just to show you that it works, and in the end this is what you're going to end up with. The more you do this, the better you'll get. Perhaps the most important two things that I've realized in making the grills this way is that you need very sharp blades, number one, and two, when you have the piece on the sliding table and you're cutting the grooves, you need to make sure that the spacer is tight and that you repeat the exact same measurement over and over again, so that all of the spacers that are left between the various pieces are exactly the same size. I have lots of pieces that I've done where in trying to rush it, the space between varied in size. We're now going to make up the grates for the back, and this is using the notch strips here. You need two tools. You need tweezers, my glue applicator, and a bottle of instant CA. The process is relatively simple, although it can be quite frustrating. First I assemble one side, then I square it off and use the CA to lock it in place. And then once that's done and verified, you can now fill the balance of the notch pieces in and then use CA, putting a little touch on each piece. Now, most of the books suggest that you use watered down PVA. I find CA just so much better and easier to do this repetitive task, and I think in the long term it'll be just as good. The second method uses one groove button and some plain buttons to fit in the groove, and is described in the Swan Practicum. In making the grill, you need to determine the exact size of the holes inside. In the case of the Swan, they're 2 3/4 inches square. These are the inner holes. In the case of the America, I'm not quite sure that's determined. So I'm just going to use the kit supplied to determine the size of the squares. So to make up the grating buttons, we have a piece of wood, same size, thicker than we need, and we're just going to run it through. And that's more than enough. In the case of the Swan, you square it off in whatever manner you can. I've actually used the slotted pieces to square it off, and then you put solid pieces in each hole. And you could continue like that. Then I would stick them with CA or watered down PVA, flip it over, and then put in the grooved pieces to fill in the various slots as we come along. The last method turns out to be the best so far in making the groove buttons, and it uses a modification to the Jim Barnes sliding table that I had made up by creating an inner sled that fits in the Jim Barnes sliding table. The sled has a little ridge on it which is the same thickness as the groove button, and it simply works by it establishes the first cut, and then each time a new cut is made you simply move the bulk stock down and clip it in and establish a new cut. You place the insert into the sliding table, adjusting the distance between the blade and the stop that is located on the insert to be the thickness of the groove button. These are the three methods that I've discovered so far on making up grills. You can decide which one best suits your need. When you've completed making the pieces up, it's usually a good idea to run them through a thickness sander, or you can hand sand them to give a nice clean finish before you actually put it on the model. So here we have my first attempt at using the Swan suggestion of how to make gratings. It certainly did not come out as good as the ones that I got with the kit, but I will continue to persevere. My history is that given time and lots of practice, I will get it equal to or better than this store-bought grating. These videos are meant to assist you in improving your skills, and so I would be more than happy if someone has a better method of making these gratings that you contact me, and I'll include those techniques along with the ones that I prefer in future videos on how to make gratings. So from us here on the America Project, continue modeling.